Sarah Martinez had dreamed of wearing the uniform since she was 12 years old. That was the day her older brother came home from his first deployment, his dress blues crisp and perfect, metals catching the afternoon light streaming through their family's small kitchen window. She remembered how proud their mother looked, how their father's eyes misted over as he shook his son's hand. 23 years later, Sarah stood in the parking lot of Henderson High School, adjusting her own dress blues for what would be the last time in an official capacity. The retirement ceremony was supposed to be simple, a brief speech to the students about military service, a presentation of colors, and then the formal folding of her flag. After 18 years of active duty, she had earned this moment of recognition. The October morning was crisp in small-town Tennessee, and students were already filing into the gymnasium. Sarah could hear the excited chatter of teenagers echoing through the open doors. She had spoken at career days before, but something felt different about this one. Maybe it was because it marked the end of her military journey, or maybe it was the strange phone call she had received the night before. Principal Williams had been apologetic, but firm. "Sergeant Major Martinez, I need to ask you something that might sound unusual. Would you be willing to remove your uniform jacket during the presentation? We've had some complaints from parents about the military display being too prominent." Sarah had been confused. She was being honored for her service, specifically invited to speak about her military career. "I don't understand, sir. The uniform is part of the presentation. It represents the 18 years I've dedicated to serving our country." I know, Principal Williams had stammered. "But some parents feel it might be too intimidating for the children. They're concerned about promoting militarism in schools. Could you maybe wear business attire instead?" The local newspaper story appeared 3 days later, but by then, the video had already gone viral. A student had recorded the entire confrontation on her phone, and within hours of posting it online, the footage had been shared thousands of times across social media platforms. Sarah first learned about the 6 months after the viral video incident. Sarah Martinez found herself standing in the lobby of Walter Reed National Military Medical Center in Bethesda, Maryland. The invitation had arrived 3 weeks earlier, written on official Department of Defense letterhead, and signed by the Secretary of the Army himself. The letter had been brief, but meaningful. "Sergeant Major Martinez, your recent actions in standing up for the dignity of military service and honoring fallen comrades exemplify the values we strive to instill in all service members. We would be honored to have you speak at our annual Gold Star Families Day event." Sarah had been surprised by the invitation. The viral video controversy had died down months ago, and she had deliberately avoided military events, preferring to let the attention fade completely. But Gold Star Families Day was different. This was about honoring the families of fallen service members, the very people she had tried to protect during the media circus. The event was held in the hospital's main conference center, a space designed for dignity and respect. Around 100 family members had gathered, representing losses from conflicts spanning 3 decades. Some wore photos of their lost loved ones pinned to their clothing. Others carried memorial items or wore jewelry bearing their fallen family member's name. Sarah sat in the front row, wearing her dress blue uniform once again. This time, there was no controversy about its appropriateness. Here, among military families, the uniform represented exactly what it was intended to represent: service, sacrifice, and honor. As she waited for her turn to speak, Sarah listened to other presentations. A Gold Star mother spoke about her son's deployment to Iraq and the community support that had helped her family cope with their loss. A widow shared stories about her husband's dedication to his unit and how his memory continued to inspire their children. When Sarah was introduced, she approached the podium with the same military bearing she had displayed at Henderson High School. But this audience was different. These people understood military service intimately through the ultimate sacrifice of their loved ones. 6 months ago, I found myself in an unexpected situation at a high school in Tennessee, Sarah began. I was asked to remove my uniform because some people found it inappropriate for a school setting. When I refused and explained why, I revealed something I normally keep private: a memorial tattoo honoring 7 soldiers from my unit who didn't make it home from Afghanistan. She paused, looking out at the audience of Gold Star families. What I didn't anticipate was that my private memorial would become public, and that the names of those 7 soldiers would be shared across the internet by millions of strangers. Today, I want to talk about the responsibility we have to each other, the living to the dead, and all of us to the families who carry the heaviest burden. Sarah spoke for 20 minutes about the balance between public honor and private grief, about the importance of memorializing fallen service members without turning them into political symbols, and about the ongoing responsibility that survivors have to their lost comrades. "The tattoo on my arm will always be there," she said, rolling up her sleeve to show the memorial piece. "These 7 names are with me every day, but I've learned that carrying their memory isn't just about keeping them close to my heart. It's also about protecting their stories and ensuring that their families' privacy and dignity are respected." After her speech, Sarah was approached by several Gold Star family members who thanked her for addressing the complexity of public memorialization. But one conversation stood out above all others. An elderly woman approached Sarah hesitantly, her hands shaking slightly as she held a folded piece of paper. "Sergeant Major Martinez, my name is Maria Rodriguez. I'm Michael's grandmother." Sarah's breath caught. Michael Rodriguez was one of the 7 soldiers memorialized on her tattoo, the young man who had sent care packages from his grandmother in New Mexico. This was that grandmother. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I am so honored to meet you," Sarah said, immediately standing and taking the woman's hands. "Michael spoke about you constantly. He loved you so much." The elderly woman smiled through tears that had begun forming in her eyes. "He loved you too, Mija. He wrote to us about his sergeant, about how you took care of all your soldiers like they were your own children." They talked for nearly an hour. Mrs. Rodriguez shared stories about Michael's childhood, his decision to join the Army, and the pride the family felt about his service. She also talked about the difficulty of dealing with media attention after the viral video, but she made it clear that she held no resentment towards Sarah. "I want to show you something," Mrs. Rodriguez said, unfolding the piece of paper she had been carrying. It was a photograph, worn from handling, showing Michael in his dress uniform after completing basic training. On the back, in his handwriting, were the words, "For Grandma, who taught me that serving others is the highest calling." "I brought this for you," she said, offering the photo to Sarah. "Michael would want you to have it. He would want you to know that his family is grateful for how you honor his memory." Sarah accepted the photo with trembling hands. In all her years of carrying the memorial tattoo, she had never seen such a young, hopeful picture of Michael. The formal military portrait showed a 19-year-old who believed in his mission and was proud to serve his country. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I can't accept this. This belongs with your family." "No, Mija," the older woman said firmly. "You are family too. Michael wrote about you in his last letter home. He said you were the kind of leader who made soldiers want to be better than they thought they could be. That's family." The conversation with Mrs. Rodriguez changed something fundamental in how Sarah thought about her memorial tattoo. It wasn't just her private tribute anymore. It was part of a larger network of memory that connected her to families like the Rodriguezes, to other veterans who had served with these soldiers, and to communities that had supported them. Over the following weeks, Sarah received similar contacts from other families represented on her tattoo. Jennifer Walsh's parents sent her copies of letters their daughter had written home, including several that mentioned Sarah's leadership and care for her soldiers. Tommy Chin's fiancé, now married to someone else but still honoring Tommy's memory, shared photos from their engagement and stories about Tommy's plans for after the military. Each family contact deepened Sarah's understanding of her responsibility as a keeper of memories. These weren't just names on her arm. They were complete human beings with families who loved them, dreams they never got to fulfill, and legacies that extended far beyond their military service. The experience led Sarah to establish the 7 Stars Memorial Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting Gold Star families and ensuring that fallen service members are remembered as complete human beings rather than just military statistics. The foundation's mission was shaped by lessons learned from the viral video incident, the importance of protecting families' privacy while still honoring public service. Working with the foundation gave Sarah a way to channel the attention from her viral video into meaningful action. Instead of simply being known as the veteran who stood up to school officials, she became an advocate for thoughtful memorialization and family support. The Foundation's first project was creating memory books for Gold Star families. Beautiful, professionally bound collections of photos, letters, and stories that celebrated the complete lives of fallen service members. Each book was created in collaboration with the families, ensuring that the memories preserved were the ones they wanted to share. A year after the Henderson High School incident, Sarah was invited back to the school for a special event. The student who had originally recorded the viral video, now a senior, had started a military appreciation club and wanted Sarah to speak at their first annual memorial service. This time, there was no controversy about Sarah's uniform. Principal Williams, who had learned from the previous incident, welcomed her warmly and expressed genuine appreciation for her service. The angry parent who had originally complained was also present, now serving as a volunteer for the Military Appreciation Club. "I want to apologize again for how I reacted last year," the woman said to Sarah before the event began. "I've spent this year learning about military service and the sacrifices families make. I understand now what your uniform represents." The memorial service was moving and appropriate. Students had researched local military casualties and created displays honoring service members from their community. They had reached out to families and collected stories, photos, and memories that painted complete pictures of the people they were honoring. Sarah spoke to the students about the importance of remembering fallen service members as whole people, not just military statistics. She shared stories about the 7 soldiers on her tattoo, describing their personalities, their dreams, and their relationships with their families. "Memorial means memory," Sarah told the students. "When we memorialize someone, we're not just acknowledging that they died, we're celebrating how they lived. These soldiers were sons and daughters, brothers and sisters, friends and partners. They had favorite foods and movies they loved and dreams for the future. That's what we honor when we honor their service." After the event, the student who had recorded the original video approached Sarah with a question that had obviously been weighing on her mind. "Sergeant Major Martinez, do you ever regret that I recorded the video? I know it caused problems for you and for the families." Sarah considered the question carefully. The viral video had indeed caused complications and unwanted attention. It had forced private grief into public spaces and created stress for families who were already dealing with tremendous loss. But it had also sparked important conversations and led to positive changes. "I don't regret standing up for what I believed in," Sarah finally answered. "And I don't regret that people saw the memorial to my fallen comrades. But I've learned that when we share stories about military service, we have to be thoughtful about the impact on everyone involved, especially the families." "What would you do differently if it happened again?" Sarah smiled at the young woman's directness. "I would still wear my uniform, and I would still honor the memory of my fallen comrades. But I would also be more prepared for the possibility that private moments can become public very quickly, and I would work harder to protect the families from unwanted attention while still ensuring their loved ones are remembered appropriately." The conversation reminded Sarah that viral moments, while uncontrollable, could create opportunities for education and positive change. The key was learning how to navigate the attention responsibly, always keeping the focus on the people and principles that mattered most. 2 years later, Sarah received a letter that brought her full circle from the Henderson High School incident. It was from Jennifer Walsh, the reporter who had interviewed her about the viral video, but this Jennifer Walsh was different from the soldier memorialized on Sarah's tattoo. The reporter had been inspired by Sarah's story and had decided to investigate military memorial practices across the country. Her research had led to a series of articles about how communities honor military service and support Gold Star families. The series had won a state journalism award and had influenced policy changes in several school districts regarding military presentations. "Your willingness to stand up for your principles, even in a difficult situation, reminded me why journalism matters," the reporter wrote. "Sometimes the most important stories come from unexpected moments when people choose to do what's right instead of what's easy." Sarah kept the letter in her desk drawer next to the photo of Michael Rodriguez that his grandmother had given her. Both reminded her that individual actions, even small ones like refusing to remove a uniform, could have ripple effects that extended far beyond their original context. The memorial tattoo on her arm remained unchanged, 7 names honoring 7 lives cut short in service to their country. But Sarah's understanding of what it meant to carry those names had evolved considerably. It wasn't just about personal remembrance anymore. It was about being part of a larger community of memory that included families, fellow veterans, and civilians who understood the cost of freedom. Every morning, Sarah still touched each name during her reflection time. But now she also thought about the families connected to those names, the students who had learned about military service through her story, and the ongoing responsibility to ensure that the sacrifices of the fallen continued to have meaning for future generations. The uniform hanging in her closet was brought out for special occasions, memorial services, veteran events, and school visits where she could share the stories of service and sacrifice in appropriate settings. Each time she wore it, Sarah remembered both the day at Henderson High School when she had to defend her right to honor her fallen comrades, and all the opportunities that followed to ensure their memories were preserved with dignity and respect. A viral video when her phone started ringing at 6 in the morning. The call was from her former commanding officer, Colonel James Patterson, now stationed at the Pentagon. "Martinez, have you seen the internet today?" Colonel Patterson's voice carried a mixture of amusement and concern. Sarah rubbed her eyes, still groggy from sleep. "Sir, I try to avoid the internet before coffee. Should I be worried? Depends on how you feel about being famous. There's a video of you at some school that's got about 500,000 views and climbing. Something about a uniform and a tattoo." Sarah's stomach dropped. She had hoped the school incident would remain a local matter, maybe warranting a small mention in the community newsletter. The thought of her personal story being broadcast to strangers across the country made her uncomfortable. After hanging up with Colonel Patterson, Sarah reluctantly opened her laptop and searched for the video. She found it immediately. The student had titled it "Veteran Stands Up to School Officials, Reveals Memorial Tattoo." The view count had climbed to over 800,000, and the comments section contained hundreds of responses. Watching herself on screen felt surreal. The camera had captured the entire confrontation, from Principal Williams asking her to remove her uniform to the moment she revealed her memorial tattoo. What struck Sarah most was how different the situation looked from an outside perspective. On video, she appeared calm and dignified throughout the encounter, while the adults arguing with her seemed increasingly unreasonable. The comments ranged from supportive to critical, but most praised Sarah for standing her ground and honoring her fallen comrades. Many viewers shared their own military stories or talked about family members who had served. Several commented specifically on the memorial tattoo, with some sharing photos of their own tribute ink. But not all the attention was positive. Sarah scrolled through harsh criticisms of her grandstanding and accusations that she had used her military service to embarrass civilians. Some commenters questioned whether the confrontation had been staged for publicity, while others argued that she should have respected the school's request regardless of her personal feelings. The negative comments stung, but Sarah had expected them. Controversy always brought out extreme reactions, and military-related topics were particularly divisive in the current political climate. What bothered her more was the feeling that her private memorial to fallen friends had become public entertainment. Her phone rang again. This time it was her daughter calling from college. "Mom, are you okay? My roommate just showed me this video of you at some school. Everyone's talking about it." Sarah sighed. "I'm fine, sweetheart. It's just a misunderstanding that got blown out of proportion. Mom, you were amazing in that video. I'm so proud of how you handled those people. But are you ready for this kind of attention? People are sharing it everywhere." That was Sarah's real concern. Military life had taught her the value of privacy and keeping personal matters within appropriate circles. The memorial tattoo was deeply personal, honoring friends whose families might not appreciate having their loved ones' names broadcast across the internet. By noon, Sarah's phone was ringing constantly. Local news stations wanted interviews, military blogs requested statements, and veteran organizations asked if she would speak at their events. She turned down most requests, agreeing only to a brief phone interview with the local newspaper to clarify the situation. The reporter, a young woman named Jennifer Walsh, coincidentally sharing a name with one of the soldiers memorialized on Sarah's tattoo, was respectful but thorough in her questions. "Sergeant Major Martinez, some people are saying you deliberately created this confrontation for attention. How do you respond to that?" Sarah chose her words carefully. I went to Henderson High School to participate in a retirement ceremony and to speak with students about military service. I had no intention of creating controversy. When I was asked to remove my uniform, I made a decision based on my principles and my respect for the men and women I've served with. The memorial tattoo has gotten a lot of attention online. Can you tell us more about the soldiers at Honors? Sarah paused, considering how much personal information to share. Those 7 individuals were outstanding soldiers and better people. They died serving our country in Afghanistan. Their families have been through enough pain without having their loved ones become internet celebrities. I would ask that people respect their memory and their family's privacy. The newspaper article, published the next morning, took a balanced approach to the story. It included quotes from Principal Williams expressing regret over how the situation was handled, comments from veteran organizations supporting Sarah's position, and perspectives from education officials discussing policies around military presentations in schools. But the story's reach extended far beyond the local newspaper. By the end of the week, Sarah had received interview requests from national news programs, invitations to speak at veteran rallies across the country, and even an offer from a publisher interested in her story. The attention brought unexpected consequences. Sarah discovered that some people had tracked down her home address and were posting it online, along with her military service record and personal information. While most of the attention remained positive, the lack of privacy made her increasingly uncomfortable. More troubling were the messages she received from family members of the soldiers memorialized on her tattoo. Most were grateful that their loved ones were being honored and remembered, but some expressed concern about the public attention surrounding their relatives' names. Mrs. Rodriguez, mother of Michael Rodriguez, called Sarah on Thursday evening. "Sergeant Major Martinez, I saw the video online. I want you to know how much it means to me that you honor Michael's memory, but I'm worried about all this attention. Michael was a private person, and I don't want his name being used for political arguments." Sarah felt a knot of guilt in her stomach. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I completely understand your concern. I never intended for this to become public. The tattoo is my way of honoring Michael and the others, not a publicity statement. I know that, dear. I've always appreciated how you've stayed in touch with our family and how you've honored Michael's service. But could you maybe ask people to stop sharing the video? I've had reporters calling me, and I just don't want to deal with that right now." After hanging up with Mrs. Rodriguez, Sarah felt conflicted about the entire situation. Her intention had been to stand up for principles she believed in and to honor her fallen comrades. Instead, she had inadvertently turned their memorial into a viral video that was causing distress for their families. She spent Friday morning calling the other families represented on her tattoo, explaining the situation and apologizing for the unwanted attention. Most were understanding, but she could hear the strain in their voices as they talked about dealing with unexpected media interest. The experience taught Sarah something about the difference between private honor and public recognition. The memorial tattoo had always been a personal way of carrying her fallen friends with her, a daily reminder of their sacrifice and her responsibility to live worthily of their memory. Now it had become a symbol in a larger debate about military service, civilian respect, and standing up for principles. On Friday afternoon, Sarah made a decision. She recorded a brief video message on her phone and posted it to social media, asking people to stop sharing the original video out of respect for the fallen soldiers' families. "I want to thank everyone who has supported me and who understands the importance of honoring military service," she said in the video. "But I also want to ask for something. The soldiers memorialized on my tattoo died serving our country, and their families have already sacrificed enough. They don't need the additional pain of having their loved ones become part of a public debate. Please respect their privacy and their grief." The response to her request was mixed. Many people shared her message and stopped circulating the original video, but others argued that the story had become too important to suppress. Some accused her of trying to control the narrative after benefiting from the attention. Sarah realized that once something became viral, it took on a life of its own, beyond the control of the people originally involved. The video continued to circulate, though at a slower rate, and the comments sections remained active with debates about military service, school policies, and civilian-military relations. The incident taught Sarah valuable lessons about the intersection of personal principles and public attention. Standing up for what she believed in had been the right decision. But the consequences had extended far beyond what she had anticipated or intended. A week after the original incident, Principal Williams called to invite Sarah back to the school for a proper retirement ceremony. "Sergeant Major Martinez, I think we can do better this time. No restrictions on your uniform, no interference from outside parties. Just a straightforward recognition of your service." Sarah appreciated the offer, but declined. "Principal Williams, I think the students got a more valuable lesson from what happened than they would have from a traditional ceremony. Sometimes the most important teaching moments come from unexpected situations." Instead, Sarah decided to channel the attention from the incident into something positive. She reached out to veteran organizations and offered to speak at events about the importance of honoring fallen comrades and supporting military families. She used her brief moment of fame to raise awareness about veteran mental health services and to encourage people to support Gold Star families. The memorial tattoo remained what it had always been, a private tribute to fallen friends. But the experience had shown Sarah that personal acts of honor could have public impact in ways she had never anticipated. The challenge was learning how to navigate that impact while staying true to the original intention behind the tribute. As the media attention gradually faded, Sarah reflected on the complexity of living in an era where private moments could become public property in an instant. The video had sparked important conversations about respect for military service and the sacrifices made by service members and their families. But it had also demonstrated how quickly personal stories could be transformed into political symbols or entertainment content. The 7 names on her tattoo remained the same, as did her commitment to honoring their memory. But the incident had added a new dimension to that commitment, the responsibility to protect their stories from exploitation while still ensuring they were remembered and honored. Sarah continued her daily routine of touching each name during her morning reflection, but now she was more aware of the weight that came with carrying their memory. It wasn't just about personal remembrance anymore. It was about being a guardian of their legacy in a world where privacy and dignity could be lost in an instant. The viral video eventually disappeared from trending topics, replaced by newer controversies and fresher content. But for Sarah, the lessons learned during that week continued to shape how she thought about service, honor, and the responsibility that comes with standing up for principles in a connected world. The conversation had left Sarah feeling hollow. She had served 3 tours in Afghanistan, earned commendations for valor, and led soldiers through some of the most challenging operations of her career. Now she was being asked to hide that service because it made some parents uncomfortable. But Sarah had agreed to think about it overnight. She believed in choosing her battles carefully, a lesson learned through years of military leadership. This morning, however, as she looked at her reflection in her truck's side mirror, she made her decision. The uniform stayed on. Walking through the school's front entrance, Sarah felt the familiar weight of her dress blues. Every ribbon, every badge, every piece of fabric told a story. The Combat Action Badge spoke of firefights in the mountains of Afghanistan. The Bronze Star represented the night she had led her unit through an ambush, ensuring every soldier made it home safely. The airborne wings reminded her of the fear she had overcome during jump school, proving to herself that she could do anything she set her mind to. The hallways were lined with student artwork and motivational posters. Sarah smiled at one that read, "Be yourself. Everyone else is taken." If only it were that simple, she thought. In the gymnasium, nearly 400 students sat in bleacher sections, their voices creating a low hum of anticipation. Teachers stood along the walls, some checking their phones, others keeping watchful eyes on their classes. Sarah noticed Principal Williams near the podium, speaking quietly with a woman she didn't recognize, probably one of the concerned parents. As Sarah approached the front of the gymnasium, conversations began to quiet. Students pointed at her uniform, some taking pictures with their phones. She could hear whispered conversations about the medals and badges adorning her chest. For many of these kids, this might be their first real interaction with someone in military service. Principal Williams stepped to the microphone, his face showing obvious discomfort. "Students, we have a special guest today. Sergeant Major Sarah Martinez is here to talk about Her experiences in the military. He glanced at Sarah, then at the woman standing beside him. Before we begin, Sergeant Major, I believe we discussed. Sarah stepped forward, her military bearing evident in every step. The gymnasium fell completely silent. Principal Williams, with respect, I believe there's been a misunderstanding. The principal's face reddened. Sergeant Major Martinez, we agreed that you would modify your presentation to be more appropriate for our school environment. Sarah looked out at the sea of young faces staring back at her. These students deserved to see someone who had dedicated her life to serving others, someone who had made sacrifices they couldn't yet understand. They deserved to see that service came in many forms, and that honor was something worth pursuing. I agreed to consider your request, Sarah replied, her voice carrying across the gymnasium without the need for a microphone. Military training had taught her how to project authority. After careful consideration, I've decided that removing my uniform would be a disservice to these students and to the men and women I've served alongside. A murmur rippled through the students. Some teachers shifted uncomfortably. The woman beside Principal Williams whispered something urgent in his ear. Principal Williams cleared his throat. Sergeant Major, I'm going to have to insist that you either modify your presentation or we'll have to cancel it entirely. This uniform display is simply too aggressive for our school environment. The gymnasium was so quiet that Sarah could hear the ventilation system humming overhead. She looked at the students again, seeing confusion and curiosity in their faces. These young people were watching an adult conversation about respect, service, and standing up for principles. What lesson would they learn if she backed down now? Principal Williams, Sarah said, her voice steady and clear. This uniform represents 18 years of service to our country. It represents the men and women who have died protecting the freedoms that allow us to have this conversation today. If you find that too aggressive, then perhaps we need to examine what values we're actually teaching these students. The woman beside the principal stepped forward, her face flushed with anger. This is exactly what we were afraid of. Military propaganda in our schools. These children don't need to see weapons of war. Sarah looked down at her uniform, genuinely puzzled. Ma'am, I'm not carrying any weapons. This is a dress uniform, designed for ceremonial occasions exactly like this one. The uniform itself is a weapon, the woman shot back. It promotes violence and militarism. We demand that you remove it immediately. The students were now fully engaged, watching this adult confrontation unfold. Sarah could see some teachers looking uncomfortable with the situation, while others seemed interested in how it would resolve. Sarah took a slow breath, drawing on years of experience dealing with difficult situations. Ma'am, I understand you have concerns about military influence in schools. However, I was invited here to share my experiences and to honor the service of military personnel. Removing my uniform would be like asking a doctor to remove their white coat before discussing medicine, or asking a police officer to remove their badge before talking about public safety. Principal Williams looked between Sarah and the angry parent, clearly wishing he was anywhere else. Sergeant Major Martinez, surely you can understand our position. We need to be sensitive to all viewpoints in our school community. I absolutely understand the need for sensitivity, Sarah replied. But I also understand the need for honoring service and sacrifice. These students are looking at someone who has dedicated her adult life to protecting others. That's not propaganda, that's reality. The confrontation was escalating, and Sarah could see that some of the teachers were beginning to look worried. Students were pulling out phones, undoubtedly recording the argument. This was not how she had envisioned her retirement ceremony. If the uniform is such a concern, Sarah said finally, then perhaps you should know what's underneath it. Before anyone could respond, Sarah began unbuttoning her dress blue jacket. Principal Williams looked panicked, the angry parent seemed satisfied, and the students leaned forward with curiosity. As Sarah removed her jacket, revealing the white shirt underneath, something else became visible. On her left arm, clearly visible through the fabric of her shirt, was the dark outline of a tattoo. But this wasn't just any tattoo. It was large, detailed, and obviously significant. The angry parent, who had been preparing to make another comment about military influence, suddenly stopped mid-sentence. Her eyes fixed on Sarah's arm, and Her expression shifted from anger to confusion to something that looked almost like recognition. Other adults in the room began to notice the tattoo as well. Even through the white fabric of Sarah's shirt, the dark lines were clearly visible, covering most of her left forearm. Some of the students pointed it out to their friends, whispering about what it might be. Sarah folded her jacket carefully and set it on a nearby chair. Since there seems to be so much concern about what this uniform represents, perhaps it's time you understood what the person wearing it has actually experienced. She rolled up her left sleeve slowly, revealing the tattoo that had caught everyone's attention. As the full image became visible, the gymnasium fell into complete silence. The tattoo was a memorial piece, beautifully detailed and obviously professionally done. It showed the silhouettes of soldiers against a mountainous background, with names inscribed beneath each figure. But it wasn't just the artistic quality that had stunned the room. It was what the tattoo represented. At the bottom of the piece, in elegant script, were the words, "Never Forgotten," and a date from 6 years earlier. Above the inscription were 7 names, each one carefully lettered in honor of fallen comrades. Sarah stood quietly for a moment, letting the reality of what they were seeing sink in. This wasn't just ink on skin. This was a living memorial to people who had made the ultimate sacrifice. "These are the names of 7 soldiers from my unit who didn't make it home from Afghanistan," Sarah said, her voice carrying clearly through the silent gymnasium. "Every morning when I put on this uniform, I do it in their honor. When I stand at attention during the national anthem, I'm standing for them. When I salute the flag, I'm saluting the country they died protecting." The angry parent who had demanded the uniform removal now stood frozen, staring at the memorial tattoo. Her face had gone pale, and she seemed to be struggling to find words. Sarah continued, "Michael Rodriguez was 19 when he died protecting a convoy of medical supplies. Jennifer Walsh was a single mother of 2 who volunteered for a dangerous reconnaissance mission because she knew the intelligence could save lives. Tommy Chun was supposed to go home the next week to marry his fiancée." As Sarah spoke each name, she touched the corresponding inscription on her tattoo. The students watched in absolute silence, many of them probably hearing stories of real military sacrifice for the first time in their lives. "This uniform isn't about promoting violence or militarism," Sarah continued. "It's about remembering the people who believed so strongly in protecting others that they were willing to die for that belief. It's about honoring service and sacrifice and the idea that sometimes standing up for what's right requires real courage." Principal Williams seemed to have forgotten about the controversy entirely. He was staring at the memorial tattoo with obvious respect and perhaps a touch of shame for how he had handled the situation. The angry parent finally found her voice, but when she spoke, it was barely above a whisper. I didn't know." Sarah looked at her with understanding rather than anger. "Ma'am, I don't expect everyone to understand what military service entails, but I do hope that people will take the time to learn before they judge. These students deserve to hear stories about courage, sacrifice, and dedication to something larger than yourself." The woman nodded slowly, tears beginning to form in her eyes. My brother was in the military. He came home, but he was never the same. I guess I've been angry about that for a long time." Sarah stepped closer to the woman, her expression softening. "Military service affects everyone differently. Coming home isn't always the end of the battle. Your brother's experience is valid, and so is your anger about what he went through." The conversation had shifted completely from confrontation to understanding. Students watched as adults worked through a complex emotional situation in real time, demonstrating that disagreements could be resolved through honest communication. Sarah picked up her jacket and put it back on, once again covering the memorial tattoo. "The men and women represented on my arm would want their sacrifice to be remembered, but they would also want it to serve a purpose. They would want young people to understand that there are things worth fighting for, worth sacrificing for, and worth protecting." She turned to address the students directly. "You don't have to join the military to serve others. You can be teachers, doctors, firefighters, social workers, or any profession that helps people. The important thing is that you find something you believe in strongly enough to dedicate your life to it." A student in the front row raised her hand tentatively. "Sergeant Major, did you know those soldiers well? The ones on your tattoo?" Sarah smiled at the question. I knew them very well. We lived together, trained together, and served together. They were my family in every way that matters. Michael used to send care packages to all of us from his grandmother, who lived in New Mexico. Jennifer taught us all how to play poker and usually won our money. Tommy could fix anything that was broken and never asked for anything in return. Another student raised his hand. Why did you get the tattoo? Doesn't it make you sad to see it every day? It does make me sad sometimes, Sarah admitted. But it also makes me proud. It reminds me that I was part of something important, something bigger than myself. It reminds me that their sacrifice meant something, and that I have a responsibility to live my life in a way that honors their memory. The questions continued for another 20 minutes. Students asked about military life, about leadership, about dealing with difficult situations, and about finding the courage to do the right thing. Sarah answered each question thoughtfully, drawing on years of experience and the wisdom that comes from facing genuine challenges. When the bell rang, signaling the end of the assembly, students filed out quietly, many of them still processing what they had witnessed. Several stopped to shake Sarah's hand or to say thank you. Principal Williams approached Sarah as the gymnasium emptied. Sergeant Major Martinez, I owe you an apology. I should have stood up for your right to wear your uniform from the beginning. I let my concern about complaints override my judgment. Sarah shook his hand. Principal Williams, leadership means making difficult decisions with incomplete information. You were trying to balance different perspectives in your school community. That's not an easy job. The woman who had originally complained about the uniform waited until most of the students had left before approaching Sarah. I want to apologize for my reaction. You were right. I was judging something I didn't understand. Those soldiers you honored, they deserve better than my ignorance. They deserve to be remembered, Sarah replied. That's all any of us can ask for, to have our service remembered and to know that it made a difference. As Sarah walked back to her truck, she reflected on how the morning had unfolded. She had come to the school expecting a simple retirement ceremony, but instead had participated in something much more meaningful. The confrontation over her uniform had created an opportunity to teach not just about military service, but about standing up for principles, understanding different perspectives, and finding common ground even in disagreement. The memorial tattoo on her arm served as a constant reminder of the people she had served with and the responsibilities that came with survival. Today, she had used that reminder to teach a new generation about service, sacrifice, and the importance of looking beyond surface judgments to understand the deeper truth of someone's experience. Driving home through the familiar streets of her small Tennessee town, Sarah felt a sense of closure about her military career. She had ended her service not with a traditional ceremony, but with something far more valuable, a chance to ensure that the sacrifice of her fallen comrades would be understood and remembered by a new generation of young Americans. The uniform hanging in her backseat would soon be retired to her closet, brought out only for special occasions and ceremonies. But the lessons she had learned in 18 years of service and the memories of the soldiers memorialized on her arm would continue to guide her in whatever came next. As she pulled into her driveway, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. It was from one of the students who had attended the assembly. Thank you for not taking off your uniform. My dad is deployed right now, and seeing you today made me proud of him all over again. Sarah smiled and saved the message. Sometimes the most important battles were fought not on distant battlefields, but in school gymnasiums, where understanding could triumph over ignorance and respect could overcome prejudice. Today had been one of those battles, and she was grateful to have been part of it.